Okay, so for the first one, we have sine of x minus tangent of x over cosine of x minus cotangent of x equals tangent squared of x times cosine of x minus 1 over sine of x minus 1. So we have to first turn everything into sine and cosine, so that way, that's always a rule to make things a little bit easier. So tangent of x is going to be sine of x over cosine of x, and then we have cosine of x minus, and then cotangent of x is going to be cosine of x over sine of x. So then that's going to be equal to, and tangent squared of x is equal to sine squared of x over cosine squared of x, and then times the cosine of x minus 1 over the sine of x minus 1. So then we have, what we now have to do is we have to simplify this out. So we have this now. So basically what you do with that is you go ahead and try to do the common denominator. And then same for over here. So what you have to do is you have to say times cosine of x over here, and then times sine of x over here. So, and then this one, the right side, right over here, is you're gonna distribute. So basically it's gonna be sine squared of x times cosine of x minus 1 over cosine squared of x times sine of x minus 1. So then you have this. And you would apparently have to distribute in the sine squared of x. But for now, let's look at the left side. So we have sine of x. So now that we made, we now have the common denominator, we say sine of x cosine of x minus sine of x all over cosine of x divided by cosine of x sine of x minus the cosine of x over the sine of x. So then we're going to say, we're going to distribute this part. So then we have sine squared of x cosine of x minus sine squared of x over cosine squared of x sine of x minus cosine squared of x. And then this is what you have after. Okay. So now we can go ahead and simplify this a little bit more. This is basically saying, so do not let the lines confuse you. You can rewrite it as a division of two fractions. So you have sine of x cosine of x minus sine of x over cosine of x divided by cosine of x sine of x minus cosine of x over sine of x is equal to sine squared of x cosine of x minus sine squared of x over cosine squared of x sine of x minus cosine squared of x. So then you have something like this, and then what you do is you do the same thing where you have like a fraction, how you have a over b divided by b over, or like c over d is equal to a over b times d over c. So that's what this is basically saying. So you keep this one the same, so you have sine of x cosine of x minus sine of x over cosine of x, and then you go ahead and change this to a multiplication times, and then you go ahead and flip this over. So you have sine of x over cosine of x, sine of x minus cosine of x. And then this is going to be equal to sine squared of x, cosine of x minus sine squared of x over cosine squared of x, sine of x minus cosine squared of x. Okay. So after you have that, you can go ahead and basically simplify. So you have sine of x times sine of x cosine of x minus sine of x over, over cosine of x times cosine of x sine of x minus cosine of x. And you basically distribute. So on both sides. So this is going to be equal to sine squared of x cosine of x minus sine squared of x over cosine squared of x sine of x minus cosine squared of x. Okay, so now we can go ahead and finish it off. So now that we distribute, we're going to have sine squared of x cosine of x minus sine squared of x. And right now we're just looking at the left equation. And then the bottom we have cosine squared of x sine of x minus cosine squared of x. So, and then that's going to be equal to sine squared of x cosine of x minus sine squared of x divided by cosine squared of x sine of x minus cosine squared of x. And we verified it. So that's how you would do it. So for the second one, we have cosine squared of x. So cosine squared of x minus sine squared of x, I think. Give me a second. Over sine of x cotangent of x. Minus cosine of x tangent of x. And that's equal to cosine of x plus sine of x. Okay, so this one we have, so we can go ahead and simplify this. So this is basically, so we know that this is equal to cosine of 2x. And let's see. Okay, so yeah, so this is pretty simple. So we have cosine squared of x minus sine squared of x. So this is like saying x squared minus y squared. Okay, that's going to be equal to x plus y times x minus y. So this is going to be saying cosine of x minus sine of x times cosine of x plus sine of x. And you're going to divide, and we have sine of x times cosine of x over sine of x minus cosine of x times sine of x over cosine of x. So this then cancels out. These two cancel out. So then we have, and this is all equal to cosine of x plus sine of x. Okay, so then we have cosine of x minus sine of x times cosine of x plus sine of x. And then you're going to divide by cosine of x minus sine of x because of these canceled out. So then after that, we know that these cancel out. So then we have that cosine of x plus sine of x is equal to cosine of x plus sine of x. And that's how you would do it. Please let me know if you have any questions, but that's basically how you do those two. So thank you.